So I'd like you to take us back to your first stint as a CEO and just share with us some of those high points.
My first CEO was in 2007, Prudential in the Philippines. It was quite a small operation and it was a brand new experience. I went there and I didn't know anybody in the Philippines, and there I was to lead this company forward. It was a great, very steep learning curve. Had some of my best moments in those 2 years and equally some of my worst moments as well.
So what advice would you give to that new CEO who's walking into that company on day one? Where do they start?
I actually prepared a lot to become a CEO. I met up with CEOs and asked them for advice. And all I got from them was, you have to just go and do it and you learn on the job. And I think they were right. Yeah. So I went in and I'd only looked after functions. But when you go in there, you got to give up looking after those functions. And you got to look after the whole company. And that in itself was, I think, was very difficult. And it just teaches you that you are actually the leader and you can't duck. You can't hide behind anybody else because you have to lead from the front.
So I guess from what you just said, then your core team, your senior managers in each of those areas are vital. How do you go about getting those people on side and working with you for your new vision?
Initially, I didn't have a vision. So, I mean, the first thing I did was to spend a lot of time with each of the individuals, not talking too much about work, but trying to know more about the Filipino culture, more about their personal lives, trying to be accepted as a foreigner in the Philippines. And then slowly but steadily, the work wasn't very different from what I'd done in Singapore. So work, I think, was secondary. I think the first thing was to become part of the Filipino culture.
So looking back now at that experience, what is the greatest wisdom that you got from that stint as a CEO?
Is that you got to do it yourself. I mean, there's not much coaching that you'll get to become a good CEO. And you can never delegate leading the company. I think you can delegate everything else. But in terms of the vision, the strategy has to be yours. And after that, you got to make sure that everyone else accepts that. Otherwise, you are running the company on your own. And when you look back, there's nobody following you.
Right. So let's move forward to the second stint as CEO, which is Aviva Singapore, correct? So what's the difference in moving from Prudential to Aviva? Was it a big step up in size of company? Were there any significant differences?
I think the company much bigger. There are times when I wonder whether the size of the company really matters so much. You can be signing $1 million in Filipino pesos, or you could be signing $1 million in Singapore dollars. And sometimes it's actually that the decision is still the same. The size of the decision hasn't really changed. I learned a lot from my first stint, which I brought to bear in the second one. I was also more comfortable in Singapore, having spent many more years. I knew the regulations, the regulators. I knew most of the other CEOs in the industry. I knew a lot of the staff that worked in Aviva Singapore. Even though I hadn't worked with them in Aviva, but I'd worked with them in the previous jobs and I'd mingled with them through my years in the industry. So in that sense, it was much easier in my second stint.
So what would you say is a CEO's biggest asset?
I mean, it's got to be the people. I mean, you lead a group of people. In Aviva, we got 600 people. And I think the first thing you do as a CEO is to go out and say, you don't think about yourself. The more you think of the remaining 599 people, because ultimately you are paying for their salaries. So if you can guide them and get the best value from what they are capable of doing, then you're sure to run a pretty good company.
So what would you say are those key things when it comes to getting the best from your people?
I think not all people are motivated by money. Though to be honest, I haven't found many people who'd come to work if they weren't paid a salary. So you got to find the right balance in there. And a lot of people, they like a good strategy. They need to understand how they fit into that strategy, why they are part of that company. I think so. to me, to get the best out of your people, you got to give them a clear strategy. And then I think it's a question of giving them the accountability, the freedom to make their decisions such that everyone is aligned. Everyone wants to rise, but sometimes people don't want to make the big decision of where to take the company. So that as a CEO, you absolutely cannot delegate. You make that call and then get the people to align with that decision, and then give them the freedom to make some mistakes. That's the only way they're going to make some great calls.